I'm able to take a step back and go, okay, I see I'm getting bored with that, but this rabbit hole is really exciting. Then I have the capability to say, but I still have to do this stuff that I don't like. And what I found is that just understanding that is the first step. If you're building a relationship, it's about two people or whatever the relationship might be. And just the idea of giving it time to breathe, it sounds like the simplest thing, but it's such a game changer. Many of the creative people that we know have ADHD or have an ADHD mind, that hyper-focus, that creativity, that ability to connect dots, the things that you see things that people don't see. Most people with ADHD do have this kind of broad view of everything around them and will notice things that nobody else does.
Welcome to another Smart ADHD Stories episode, and this time I'm joined by my friend Daniel Nestle, who is an award-winning communications executive, podcaster and author, named to the PR Week magazine Dashboard 25 in 23 and 24, awarding the top 25 movers and shakers in communications technology. Born and raised in New Jersey, Dan spent 16 years in Japan and speaks Japanese. Dan and his wife are proud parents to two incredible daughters and parents to two lovable hounds. He currently hosts the Trending Communicator podcast. And again, this is a Smart ADHD Stories episode when we delve deep into the life stories of other fellow smart ADHDers who are successful business owners, creatives, entrepreneurs. It's a raw episode, unedited. Let's get on with it right now. Hi, Dan. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Ian, it is awesome to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this show, and I don't know. I'm flattered that you're having me on. It's really cool.
Well, I'm excited. We've been talking for quite a while. We know each other from Mark Schaefer's Rise community. I'm trying to find like a phrase to explain what the Rise community is. I mean, it's a community of really smart marketers, I suppose.
Mostly,
and it's most of the time. And there's loads of like amazing opportunities that happen in there. I've been in a metaverse. I think I gave a talk in the metaverse. There's been a book. You've been part of that as well. What else would you say about the Rise community?
Well, Rise is, it started off as an experimental group, I think, of people who are, of marketers who had been in Mark Schaefer's orbit, right? And Mark set forth on this, he's all about community and building community in his book, Belonging to the Brand, right? Was all about that. And sort of as a side effort to that, and coming out of the Uprising, which is a 30-person retreat that Mark runs once a year in Tennessee, we decided to just run an experiment and see if we could build a community. It was originally based on Web3 and crypto, right? Not crypto trading, but the idea of tokens and coins. So it was like just maybe 20 or 30 of us started that off. And it quickly became apparent that there's a lot of knowledge that's being floated around and tossed around, and it's a great place to share and talk about things. And we had remarkably open people. So I think even though it was originally designed to be a learning community as well, it actually leaned more and more into learning and into sharing than into Web3. And then, within a year of starting Rise, the token creator economy, tokenized world, all that kind of stuff sort of crashed. And that left us in a very good position because we no longer needed to rely on this whole idea of you need tokens. And you could focus in on, well, we have all these, and by that point it was maybe 100 or so or 200 people who are just solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, corporate marketers, communicators. This group of people had this really wide range of knowledge to share. And it just became a sharing community. And it's grown organically. So, something would be topical and it would become a discussion thread, and then it would become a discussion room. And now, after a couple years, I think we're heading into year 3. It is by far the best resource for figuring out what's going on right now and probably 5 steps into the future with marketing and communications, especially around new technologies, AI. Metaverse is still there. And if I ever want to know anything about metaverse, I can check out Rise. But um, you know, there's like AI, there's podcasting, personal branding, um, general future of marketing, social media. These topics keep bubbling up. And then what was remarkable, I thought, so, forgive me if I bounce around because, this is the ADHD podcast after all, so you're going to have to bear with me.
Yeah.
But, what was remarkable about all this is that you have this core of people who maybe have met once or twice, or just at least, or maybe met only through Rise, but instantly had this sort of connection because we do all share this passion for learning and for uplifting one another. Not on purpose, but definitely by design, I think, but not on purpose. Like it's amazing how the laws of attraction work, and like attracts like. But you have all these people who are just giving of themselves, giving of knowledge, and it just became this killer resource. So now it has grown into a couple hundred people who are dedicated to improving the profession, improving the craft, improving our own knowledge, helping one another. You mentioned a book. We also experiment, right? So it's an experimental community. So anytime there's something new on the horizon, we kind of split off an informal group and just do it. So we did one of the first ever community driven books that was not written with one word of AIs before AI even was hit the mainstream. But the most amazing marketing book ever, you mentioned, right, Ian? That's how we met. That was a fantastic experiment that turned out to be a wonderful book. And now we're doing some group work with making AI. We're building a prompting resource and a prompting library, for example, within the community, just for people in the community. So these are the kinds of things that we do. It is a learning resource. It's a professional development resource. It's a friendship resource. And then the very last thing I will say, and I promise, is I think it was the remarkable thing I was leaning towards, is this whole idea of the marketing mindset or the marketer's mindset. And I think you've been really active on that thread. And that's one of the ways that we discovered, other people who do struggle with challenges, with whether it's ADHD or anxiety or depression or what have you. It's a very safe space within the community where we can talk about it, how it affects our roles and how it affects even our marketing or how it is a superpower for us. But it's a remarkably safe and free space to connect with people who are like us, not just in the fact that we have the profession, but also the human side of our lives. We tend to share quite a few things. So I've really loved that about Rise. And I know that that's not a very short encapsulation of what it is because it's impossible, but it's a great community, a learning community for marketers and communicators that I would recommend to anyone.
Yeah, it's impossible to summarize it so quickly. I think that's why I was struggling to do that. And then you just that was a fantastic explanation of it. And, there's this age-old saying, isn't there, that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
And I feel that in the Rise community, I'm definitely in the right room because there are so many amazingly smart people. But it's not just the collective intelligence of everybody. And it is the generosity. It is the... you mentioned it being a safe space, so you can, to a certain extent, be quite vulnerable. There's that encouragement there, and it shows you really that social media, I think, has really changed because now it's not really so much of a safe space anymore. There might have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been quite open on social media. That's not really the best place, I think, anymore. It's these communities like Rise where you can be with other like-minded people. You can grow together. I mean, it's the name Rise. We're all rising together. We all help each other rise, which is amazing. So, and you mentioned the fact that there's the mindset channel. So it's all on Discord, and that's a place where people can be really quite open about their struggles as well, because we all whether you are, whatever the phrases are, neurotypical or neurodivergent or however your brain works, there are always going to be struggles. And I think in this world where we feel less connected, ironically, because you'd think we'd be more connected, we need these kind of communities much, much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
couldn't agree
think
more.
so.
I was talking with Mark about that at some point, and Mark Schaefer, like I said, is Rise started in Mark Schaefer's orbit, and Mark is definitely the heart of Rise. It's his brand in many ways. But you talk about being the smartest person in the room. There's no question that Mark is one of the smartest people I know. Um, but he never comes across as the smartest person in the room. And in fact, one of the reasons why we love Rise so much is because we've moved from this place where everybody, I think, was in it originally to, ooh, let's hear what Mark Schaefer has to say. And very quickly, we were predisposed of the notion that Mark was anything different than us. And now he's a peer. I mean, he runs the show, but there's no question that you know even the marketing glitterati like Mark or there's a few other folks in the community who are named who are sort of well known people. Um, Everybody's on the level. Everybody's the same, learning from one another and making pronouncements that aren't quite correct and getting called out on it and in a very polite, nice way. Um, but I've really enjoyed that whole part of it. And you mentioned it's on Discord. It's another key thing, right? And it's why we can probably be more open is because you can't, as marketers, everybody out there should understand that it's dark social, right? And not in a, and I don't mean dark in a negative or disparaging way. It's dark in that it's not open to search. It's not available to anybody who doesn't have access. So it's about as private as you can get on
Yeah.
these kinds of on social media platforms.
Yeah, definitely. It's I just love that part of it, and I think it shows you how much we need those communities. Whether it is a physical community of people around you, cheerleaders, encouragers, people that you can rely on. I think we all need that, but what Rise does is it connects us worldwide. I mean, you're in the US, I'm in the UK. There are people from all around the world. I hope my hope is that the Smart ADHD podcast becomes a community because I want this to be again a safe space. A place where we can all learn together. As I keep on mentioning on this podcast,
Yeah.
I am not an ADHD expert. I'm learning and I make mistakes. That's the other thing that you said that
Yeah.
sometimes I think often we learn from our mistakes most of the time. So sometimes we have to say things and it comes out all wrong. Sometimes we notice that and we think, oh, that wasn't the best way of explaining that. But sometimes other people will say, actually, Ian, that's probably not the best way of explaining it. It's this way. We can all learn together on that. But Dan, I want to kind of let's steer the conversation into the world of into your world really, and
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your journey with ADHD.
Sure.
That's what we talk about on this podcast, and we're going to talk about how it's influenced, how it impacts your personal life and in your business. I'm really interested to hear some of the way you navigate in terms of your work and your business and social media,
Right.
and the fact that communication and email is so much stuff that we have to deal with these days.
Mm-hmm.
But when did you first realize
Mm-hmm.
that you were different in some way? So you might not have known it was ADHD, but there was
Right.
something about you that maybe was a little bit different.
I've always been a massive procrastinator, like incredibly dangerously procrastinative. I don't know what the proper noun is, but in fact, my mug here, and I asked Ian before we got on the show if explicit language was possible, and this is the only reason why I asked is because I carry a mug that says "Stop procrastinating," right? And hopefully that'll be the only F-bomb on the show. I just noticed that I was always procrastinating, and it never really harmed me. In fact, I would say I work better under pressure. I know I need that pressure to really turn out the best product, and that was true through high school. It's true through college. It was true everywhere up until today almost. And then, you know, I managed to just get through everything that way. I never missed anything. I never, didn't finish a project. And I know that a lot of people who do suffer with ADHD have such severe crippling problems that it does cause them to lose their job, or it causes them to miss a project or something, that's not quite pleasant. But I've always been able to get to the finish line. So probably because I've always been able to get to the finish line, I never thought there was a problem. I just thought that, oh yeah, I'm a procrastinator. Give me a label. Um, and then, these things tend to build over time, over a very long time. And when you have other stressors in your life is when you start to notice, or other people notice for you, that wait a second, maybe I should go talk to somebody. So what happened, I think, in my case is um, life pressure, family pressure, that sort of thing. When I was, I don't know, about 15 or so years ago, maybe a little longer than that. I was, well, not quite 15 years ago. I was living in Japan, and the whole world was crashing around us because of the financial crisis at the time, right? It was the Lehman, they called it the Lehman shock in Japan, but we know what happened in 2007 and 8. And I was working at a global recruitment firm. The the firm was then just sort of turned into this whole downsizing operation where we were just getting rid of everybody. Went from 120 people to like 25 in a matter of weeks. And the end result of that was either either I had to um, also lose my job, or because I was a marketing manager, a marketing PR manager who knew a thing or two about Japan and Asia, it's like, why don't you just move to Australia? And in Australia, you can take on the same role. They're not having the same problems there, so it's your choice. You can move to Australia with Robert with the company, or you could just stay in Japan and roll the dice. So I moved to Australia. Massive, massive move. And you look at these things, and it's another part of I think ADHD in retrospect, is this idea that the grass is always greener. That okay, the new thing is the good thing. So I was so excited about moving to Australia. Um, I moved to Australia. I had a you know very young family at the time. I still think they're young, but I had basically an infant, almost, I mean, a toddler and a pre-kindergarten daughters, right, and my wife. And yeah, I moved down there, and they followed me. And the role didn't it was very hard to work. I mean, it was just very hard to get used to this whole new culture. It was difficult to build trust among my colleagues, where I'd been in Japan for so long. I know how to build trust with Japanese folks, but with this wily room of Aussies and Brits, because a lot of British expats there, I was at a loss, and it didn't really go well for me from a social standpoint. Um, and that started to bleed into my work, and there were other dynamics at play, but I started noticing, like I was just angry to go to work every day, or I was like, I can't, I'm not gonna, this is not gonna work, this is not gonna work. And I started to get these really dark thoughts about it, not in terms of self harm or anything like that, but just really pessimistic, uh, out, very, like, I did not have a good outlook about the way that things were going to go. I had the most beautiful commute in the world, Ian. I don't know if you've been to Sydney, but I lived in the northern suburbs in a place called Fairlight, a little bit of heaven on earth. I would walk down to the ferry from Manly. I would take the ferry into the central business district of Sydney every day. Bar none, it is the most beautiful 25 or 30-minute commute on earth, right? Going through Sydney Harbor, you see whales, you see dolphins, emperor penguin, like, not emperor, what are those? The little penguins, fairy penguins. I mean, I should have loved it, but I hated every minute of it. And I was like, this is no, when I started seeing dolphins and going, I don't like my life, I knew there's something wrong. Um, and things weren't going well at work. So my wife and I had a chat, and I had to do something about it. So I went to see a counselor for the first time in my life, and I used the employee program. And the counselor said, "Mate," and I'm not going to try the accent, but he said, "Mate," he said, "You're depressed. You're in a situation that's not good for you. Um, you have seasonal affective disorder because you came from Japan, which was, you know, I came like right at the end of winter into Australia, which was heading into winter. So I hadn't experienced a summer in, well, I skipped a summer essentially.
Hmm.
Um, he said, so you're depressed about this. And these environmental triggers are making it bubble up. So, so that was the first time I ever realized that I have this issue. And I didn't, even though I did some talk therapy at the time and was talking to this fellow, in the end, I couldn't I couldn't make it work for me in Australia. It was just, it, you know, it, I didn't have a network of friends and support that would help, and all the things that I know now that would have helped. I didn't have it in place. So I moved back to the States with my family and started afresh and started anew, and things are going great, you know. And that's again the thing with ADHD and with all these other issues that we may have is that you start something new and it feels like everything's been solved and you move on, right? And then years later, and I started to realize that a reliable cycle of 3 or 4 years, then I would start to be like, things aren't working out great. Things aren't working out well or whatever. I was at this job. I was doing well in the job. But things weren't like sitting with me right. I felt like crushed, like there was something wrong. Um, and I left that job. I mean, I got recruited to go into another job. So I thought, okay, everything's going to get great again. And things didn't get great when I got into the new job. New job was really stressful and difficult and challenging. And I had a very difficult situation with the leadership on my team. Um, Things that I would normally be able to handle, I think, in a like today. But at that time, I didn't know what was going on. And I again went to see a doctor, and we took this quiz, and the doctor said, "Man, you have anxiety." So I'm like, okay, I had depression, anxiety, and then I told the doctor, well, counselor once told me I was depressed. He said, well, I think you have an anxiety issue as well. Like, okay, well, what's going on here? All these things, they're starting to pile up. So I started to, you know, take medicine for that and do treatment and all this kind of stuff. And things got better for a while, and that's the way it goes. And then finally, years later, so and within a little while, I turned things around again, and I was in a very good mental place, and I got another great job, and things were going super well, and then you know I realized again at some point, um, when another, and again we're talking about huge environmental stressors start to happen, and in this case, it was right around the time of the pandemic, right? So we're talking, 2020, um, when okay, all of a sudden we're stuck at home, and it wasn't a big deal to work from home for me. I'd been working remote for a long time, but you know, I was like, I'm not motivated to do anything. Like, what's going on here? And then I'd get requests from my boss or somebody, and there was never any like real urgency because nobody knew what was going on at this particular time. And I would do the work, but I would always feel like, what's going like this isn't, I feel like I'm just like I was procrastinating, of course, but I felt like I was like just not having any satisfaction. It was totally unrewarded, even when I'd finished an assignment. So I started seeing all these. This is when I think those online, maybe the laws changed or something, and you start seeing all these get diagnosed for ADHD online everywhere. So I did one or two of those quizzes, and it's like, you have ADHD, you have ADHD. I'm like, I don't have ADHD. Maybe anxiety, maybe a little depression, but so I had made an appointment with one of those online. You know, I was a sucker. I'm an Instagram sucker. I love Instagram ads. They love me. So I so I went through like this whole process, and of course this nurse practitioner said, "Well, you do have ADHD," so they gave me Adderall. And it was like, congratulations, here's your Adderall. That's how I felt, and so I started taking the Adderall, and all I felt was jittery, but I didn't feel any of the underlying things changing, you know. So I stopped taking Adderall, and I went to a real doctor this time, and my real doctor said, "Okay, let's do this for real." And we went through some assessments. I went to a psychiatrist. I went through the whole I did, I don't know how many, like 180-page intake for a proper evaluation. And I'm glad I did that, um, because in the end, everything that, like I said, it's cumulative, and everything that I've been talking about, and up until this point, where there was depression, there was anxiety, all true, but it's all part of this combined type ADHD that I was diagnosed with, with a very, with a really nice side dish of anxiety, right? So now with proper counseling and proper psychiatric assistance, I've definitely been able to get a good handle on it. But it's also really just knowing what this is has changed a lot about the way that I'm able to kind of see what's happening in my life and understand the signs and go, okay, I know where I'm at now. I know which phase of my kind of cycle it is, and because for me it does come and go in cycles, and I was able to get a grip on it. And the funny thing is that I learned that this is something that's been with me all my life, and that procrastination I kept talking about, just to come full circle, was my anxiety kicking in, right? So because of ADHD and because I had the anxiety to kind of really, you know, give it a nice, good, solid foundation, the anxiety actually tempered it. And that's why I was able to complete and never, that's why I always finished my assignments and did everything proper, is because, you know, I'd get to the very end of the near the deadline, the anxiety would go into overdrive, and I would really have to get things done. But if I never had an anxiety or disorder or whatever you want to call it, who knows? I might have just been homeless at some point. I don't know. Like, the anxiety combined with ADHD has turned out to be actually, not a terrible thing for my productivity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm very similar to you, and I think I've used anxiety as a kind of a tool to get me to do things.
Yeah.
It kicks in. The problem is it doesn't always kick in until the last minute because you're
Right.
procrastinating,
Hmm.
and then you use the fact that it needed to be in yesterday or the day after or whatever
Yeah.
to then kickstart. So the anxiety then kicks in, and this is something that our guest on the show, Tamara Razia, who's written My Brain, Your Brain's Not Broken. She talks about the 6 bad tools that we kind of use.
Mhm.
Anxiety is one of them. Procrastination is another. Anger. And I've found at different points in my life that anxiety almost isn't enough for certain things. So I pull out another thing. It might be a bit of self-loathing today or something like
Right.
that. And so
They're
that's what I was going to
connected,
ask
right?
you. So, yeah. So
Yeah, they're
like,
connected.
how, how is in terms of like getting stuff done? You've mentioned anxiety, and I think it's interesting. A lot of people with ADHD also struggle with anxiety too.
Mhm.
Are there any other kind of tricks that are perhaps negative that you've used over the years to kind of get you to do stuff like that? You've mentioned anxiety and
Yeah.
procrastination.
It's hard to tell because, certainly anxiety has been a crutch, I guess, in many ways. Um, I didn't realize it. So I'm sure there are a few things I've been doing and habits I've had in my life that, um, I might not even be aware of, that have been,
Mm.
ways for me to get through things. But I think one thing is I've sort of chosen as my area of focus, or areas of focus, things that are very, that ADHD is quite conducive to. Like, so I don't know if this is so strategic in any way, or if it's a trick or a tool, because it's certainly not that. It's just that, um, like, let's take for example, uh, artificial intelligence, so AI, so Gen AI, that's happening right now, that everybody's so hip and keen on, right? For a person like me with my particular mix of anxiety and ADHD, plus whatever knowledge I have, right? I saw this come on the horizon and I was like, this is it. This is me. I love this. And I've said this like about different technologies in the past, but I jump on this and get a really deep uh, initial grasp of this bright, shiny new object. Like in this case with AI, for example, it has incredibly positive implications for my career, and knowing more about it has been a boon and a benefit, and is certainly where I plan to go with my whatever time I have left as a professional, until the next thing, I suppose. But the the tendency, I think, to look at these new things and dig deep and get knowledge has been a I guess it falls under this whole idea of a tactic or a trick, I suppose, that has helped me to move forward in my life and succeed.
Yeah.
And that is I owe that, I think, a lot to ADHD in that I see something new, and it's very easy to focus on it and hyper focus on it for a short time at least and get ahead of the game. Staying
Yeah.
ahead is a whole separate story, right? But
It
being ahead is
is.
a good thing. Yeah.
It is, and I share your excitement with AI. I think partly, yes, it is a new shiny technology, but also I think there are so many ways in which AI can help the issues that I struggle with ADHD. Remembering things and storing information and summarizing long documents, things like that. Which
Yeah.
that really excites me. But you mentioned quite a few things there that remind me about the I see ADHD. There are so many kind of characteristics or traits with ADHD that are both a blessing and a curse at the same time. So
Yeah.
like going down the rabbit hole, following your curiosity, these are kind of, you could argue, superpowers of ADHD, but equally that is you perhaps getting distracted and
Right.
you should be doing the stuff over here, which is really boring, like your
Mhm.
accounts or whatever it is for you. And but over
Yeah.
there's this really new exciting thing. And I've looked at my career, and actually the times when I've really done my best work have been when I've gone down that rabbit hole. But I've equally realized that there are so many other things that I then drop, and then
Right.
then my business kind of suffers a little bit with that as well. So
Yeah.
my question to you is, how has ADHD, how has you realizing that you have ADHD helped you view your challenges and your strengths? So you've
Yeah.
mentioned both, actually. We started
Mhm.
off with the negative stuff, I think, quite a
Sure.
bit, and you've mentioned a few positives. So I'm interested
Yeah.
in the both
Well,
sides.
let me address what you were just mentioning about how you know that going down the rabbit hole gets to be the fun part, and the stuff you need to do is the part that you get bored of and you sort of let it drop, right? The the key to, I think, managing that, like not only just like being mindful and understanding, getting the sort of counseling and treatment or awareness of yourself that you need to know to see the signs that those are happening and be able to be a grown up and say, okay, I have to, you can overcome any behavior by understanding what the behavior is and countering it, right? You're a human being. You have free will to do such things. This is not, we're not talking about a compulsive disorder, although I'm sure there are people with compulsive disorders that this doesn't exactly apply. But as long as I have the will and the I guess the awareness of what is happening, like I'm able to take a step back and go, okay, I see I'm getting bored with that, but this rabbit hole is really exciting. Then I have the capability to say, but I still have to do this stuff that I don't like, or I still have to do this stuff that's a little bit more. And what I found is that just understanding that, right, is the first step. And then when you start to keep up the less exciting work while you pursue the rabbit hole, um, a couple things happen. Either, like, number one, you know, you still have the same amount of time in a day, so you have to figure out how to spend time on the new stuff. So hopefully you have a support system, or you have a family, or you have a job where you're able to carve out a little bit of time to get that excitement in your system, which then powers you to do the other stuff. So, how do you leverage the excitement and then say, okay, but now it's time to do the accounts or whatever it is that you do that you don't really love doing. Um, so, so figuring out like how you can carve out enough of a time to get that dose, I suppose, or that hit of the rabbit hole, so that you can then kind of run on the treadmill is really important. The other part of it, though, and which has been critical for me, is that uh, I I need to be held accountable by other people.
Hmm.
And if I'm just solo, I can do a lot solo. But when I have other people who are counting on me for something, whether it's you know in my in the corporate world, whether it's a team, or in the solo world, whether it's a client or something, you know, then that changes the perspective on that boring work, right? Or on the stuff that I'm not too excited about. Because then I'm able to, at least now in my life, uh, at least see that I may not love doing this now, but the end result of that is going to be a very pleased client or a teammate who is going to have who's going to enjoy their life better because I'm able to do something for them, or because I'm not going to make their life miserable by not doing the work. You know what I mean? There's a lot of upside. So once you start to think of, at least in my mind, to me, one of my motivators is absolutely people. Uh, if it goes too far, I'm a people pleaser, but I do want the people that I care about to care about me and to be happy. So with that as a motivator, I'm able to do some of the not so fun stuff because I know a lot of people count on it, right? So that's been one way to handle that. And then the other way to handle it is again, as a I don't know how this would work if I was 25, but at 53, or 52 actually, but I'm almost 53. Uh, I'm able to say, well, the less exciting work keeps the roof over my head, you know, helps put my kids in college. So I can get a little excited about that, a little bit, enough to do
Yeah.
it. But to say that I can just switch gears and go, okay, I'm gonna be really excited about that is self betrayal. I'm not gonna love it. I know I'm not gonna love it, but I don't have to hate it either. So it's really a matter of mindfulness mindset for sure,
Hmm.
uh, and really kind of being aware of the upsides of everything. You do like positivity is so important in all of this as well. So um, and it is not easy. I mean, it's not like I can just say, all right, I'm gonna be positive about this today. I have to see the signs first and be like, okay, now I need to kind of reorient and direct and make things work.
So, like in those times when the motivation is not there,
Mm-hmm.
when the ADHD is kind of at its strongest, the anxiety is kind of maybe not kicking in either,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to do this task, and it's really not exciting.
Yeah, it's brutal.
What are some of the things that you do in those moments? I mean, because we all have those difficult moments. You've mentioned a few things. You've mentioned like certainly if you have a job where you have bosses and other people who are relying on you, that can be part of it.
Yeah.
But have there been other things that have helped you in those moments?
Um, I mean, there's your standard like behavioral tools. I think that have been helpful. Things, like you have anything ranging from putting it into your calendar, blocking time for it, which I'm notoriously wishy-washy about. I'll put things in the calendar, and then even though it's in the calendar, it may not happen. That happens sometimes, but not all the time, right? So it's some is better than none, So I make sure that it's in my calendar, to-do lists, the whole nine yards about like yourself, the time management, writing it down, it'll happen. So, those kind of tools. Um, but uh, I think the building the routine, um, and I do like to use tools to make this happen. Um, is a learned skill, but it's also it's important to get those not so exciting tasks done. So whether it's my calendar, or like I figured out a way to work it into some of the fun stuff, right? You say, okay, especially the AI has been really great about this, because some of the work that I may not love to do, I'm able to at least kick off with a nice prompt, and then that gets me going, gets the ball rolling, and then I'm no longer in this boring kind of, oh, I have to write a weekly report thing. It's more like, oh wow, check this out. I put all these inputs into the AI, and I was able to write this really killer prompt. And yeah, sure, probably took me longer to do the prompt and the AI stuff first than to do the actual report. But that's just this time. Next time, I'll be able to get it done in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Um, so looking for ways to combine that fun stuff with the boring stuff. And in our case, certainly my case, um, it's not that huge of a stretch, because to me the fun stuff isn't like tennis or football. Although I do like going out and playing tennis, but it's not like, oh gosh, I gotta drop all my work and go play tennis. To me, the fun stuff is usually somewhat related to my work in some way. So
Mm.
finding that connection, and seeing that, well, you know what, if I spend a little time on the down the rabbit hole, as long as I have one or two takeaways to bring back to my team or the office, then it keeps the other stuff more exciting. So um, it's a matter of finding those connection points, and kind of pushing on them, but also then leveraging like your normal daily kind of tools that we take for granted, your to-do list, your schedules, your keep things in front of your face
Yeah.
always, or else they will go away. Is sort of my approach. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd love to come back to you on some of those things. Learn a little bit more about your tools. You
Yeah.
mentioned prompts and things like that, because
Yeah.
I'm really interested in that. That's the kind of thing that I love to do, and I'm totally with you. If it's something that's boring, adding a bit of excitement for us, it's kind of playing around with AI, creating this amazing
Mhm.
prompt. Like at the moment,
Yeah.
I'm creating this tool which will summarize my email and plug it into Notion and Todoist. I spent far too long on creating this
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Yeah.
and but it's fun, and it will hopefully help me to actually do the stuff. Body doubling really helps with me, so actually kind of doing the boring stuff while somebody else is on on a Zoom call has really helped me as well. But
Mhm.
like I wanted to change the subject a little bit,
Yeah.
and because
Sure.
one thing that you were talking about, I think, yeah, this was when you were in Australia, because you were talking
Hmm.
about that relationships were a little bit of a struggle,
Yeah.
and part of that was probably cultural. You mean you had to hang out with Brits for
Huh.
example.
My
I mean, that's
goodness.
the worst thing ever. But like there were these kind of times when maybe, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but
Mhm.
you maybe felt misunderstood, or you were finding it difficult to communicate, or be social with these people. So I'm interested, like, how have things changed?
Yeah.
What do you think was going on from an ADHD point of view then, and since being diagnosed 2 or 3 years ago?
Hmm.
How has that changed your kind of the way you relate to other people?
Well, first of all, it's hard to tell, because there's been 10 years or so of I hope maturity happening at the same time, right? So like things, everything, there's so much change happening in parallel to that. Going back to the Australia experience, and it was interesting because I had been in Japan for 16 years by that point. I had friends from all over the world. Like I was very close with Japanese people. With a couple of my closest friends were Brits. So it was just like when I went to Australia, I was like, why are these British people not as cool as my Japan British people? Like that kind of thing. But not Americans, Brits, the whole routine. Because when you're an expat, everybody's an expat, and I learned so much um, about cultures from around all around the world, from my time in Japan. But that said, I think, you know, in in my time in Australia, um, I think I just had these assumptions. I made these assumptions about how to um, how to approach those relationships, and when it didn't, when it wasn't going my way quickly, and this is where I think the ADHD is a problem. When it wasn't going my way as fast as I thought it should, I got disheartened, uh, and the idea of course correcting or changing my behavior started to really bother me. Why should I need to change all this? Right? Why should I be the one who has to suddenly drink 8 pints a night to make friends? Um, I'm exaggerating only a little bit, but that was the culture there, and then I started to get a little resentful, which was, I think, which inflamed the depressive part of who I was at the time, and brought that out. Um, but if I would, flashing forward to now, just approaching relationships and approaching people, I mean, it's very, very different, for sure. I mean, first of all, I'm not in Australia anymore, um, but building trust. See, let me go back to, or let me just kind of bring this back to a statement. I think that might make sense for the ADHD person, which is that for an ADHD person, time is not really our friend. You know, it's like impatience or frustration with the lack of quick results can often then open you up to all kinds of distractions, right? Or you're putting the time in to make something happen, and then you get distracted by something, whether it's socially or economically or work. Um, and I think that understanding of the way that time works has changed. So I am far more willing now to put the time it takes in to build relationships than I was then, right?
Mm.
I also completely changed my outlook on my own role in this whole relationship situation. Like, so there have been times in my life, and maybe part of my time in Australia was like this, is like, it really was centered around me. Oh, how do I get to be liked? How do I get to be successful? Um, and you become more and more self-focused, which is not good well, it's not good for anybody really, but it's not good the uh, for the ADHD type of a person, especially an anxiety driven person, because when it doesn't work well quickly, the anxiety starts to ratchet up, right? So taking that kind of time and saying, well, look, okay, this is not about me, right? This is about everyone, right? It's if you're building a relationship, it's about two people, or six people, or whatever the relationship might be, and just the idea of giving it time to breathe has been it sounds like the simplest thing, but it's such a game changer. So now I
Mm.
think whether you say it's more patience or I'm less likely to be distracted by something, or I'm just more likely to do things on somebody else's terms now than on my own terms. Like, build relationships that way because I'm more confident in myself. That's helpful. Like, those are probably why these things happen. But you know, until I really understood how my mind works, and I'm still exploring that, but until I understood this whole idea of anxiety and ADHD and depression, whatever, um, you know, you have all these questions about why is this person reacting this way, or why are things going this way, or why I'm not feeling the vibes here. But since understanding that, and even before I was officially diagnosed, but since understanding I have certain kind of, you know, issues, it's helped a lot to really just manage that process.
Yeah, that awareness that comes from being diagnosed, I think is so helpful. Understanding why certain things can be a problem. And it doesn't mean that everything's going to like change for the better as soon as you're diagnosed, but you at least know what the problems are and you can start to try and find strategies to help. And
Right.
for some, that might be medication might be part of that.
Hmm.
It might be certain kind of therapies. It might just surrounding yourself with a support network. It could be a combination of all of those things. But one thing that you were talking about, like in relationships, it is a two-way thing. And
Hmm.
I remember I went on this course, and part of it was listening, was kind of the technique of actually listening, and how many of us actually, doesn't matter whether you have ADHD or not, listening is something, it's kind of a lost art. But I think it's a particular problem for those of us with ADHD. It's not that we're
Yes.
not interested in other people, but we're, part of it is that because of our prefrontal cortex maybe not being quite as developed, remembering what we're going to say, we have to kind of get in there quick before we forget what we're going to say.
Yeah.
But there's all these things going on in our heads, so that is really hard. But I realized how often I was interrupting people, and that knowledge that, okay, I really need to listen to that person, properly listen, because they are important. That took a lot of time and effort, but I'm not perfect
Can I
at
can
that
I
at all.
can I jump in on the listening piece, because that's so that's key. You're talking about tools. I mean, I can't believe I didn't talk about that or didn't bring that up, because that's been the single hardest thing, I think, is listening in a way that you always hear about, as a leadership skill, or as a relationship building skill. Um, Jumping in and, you know, interrupting, or having to get your opinion out there. That's me. That was me for sure. I mean, still isn't sometimes. The difference is, though, that, you know, have like understanding ADHD and understanding, like, I wasn't trying to be rude, right? I could listen and hear, and I earnestly felt that the thing that I had to say, you know, was contributing to the conversation and helpful to the other person, or I felt like I connected that dot now, right? There's all these dots going on in your head, right? Um, oh, this person said something. I've connected the dot. I've got the information I need, right? I'm not going to cut the person off, but I'm going to say, hey, oh, that's great. Check this out. And then start to talk about it, because I think they are going to be excited about it. But it completely puts the whole idea of active listening off the table.
Hmm.
And it's like, and again, it's not purposeful. Um, I've absolutely been, especially when I was younger, but I've absolutely been in meetings, or in situations where, after a meeting, my boss would come to me and say, "You need to hold it back," or, "Did you see that point where you jumped in? Let's let's talk about that." I had a boss who was very, very particular about these kinds of things at some point, but she did point out to me a lot, you know, how do you think you did in that meeting? And I always hated having meetings about meetings, but I still do. But she did point out a few things that now make a lot more sense to me, because it's like, oh, I wasn't trying to step on this person's toes. I have a very urgent need, like, to express this idea that I think is going to be a benefit to everybody, or that solves the problem because the connection has been made. So it takes a lot of focus, and certainly a lot of practice, to then become a good listener on top of that. Now, which I think that I have become. So, you listen, and the way that I've gotten around this whole thing is just the simplest thing in the world: notes. Notes, notes, notes. Take notes. If I have something that has to absolutely get out there, I write it down rather than say it. I will write it down, and sit on my hands if I have to, rather than interrupt. Right. And then wait my turn. And that, just, even that mantra, wait my turn, has been really, really helpful to me. And this is, by the way, just without any, you mentioned medication, right? And we can talk about that as you wish. Uh, but without medication, that's sometimes that need to speak is uh, like you can't repress it. It's just it's there and it's infuriating. But with the right kind of treatment, sometimes that's one of the things that you can gain some control over to give yourself a little more room to think. I think that's extremely valuable.
So I was going to ask you about medication because uh, obviously you went down the, I think you mentioned the Adderall
Adderall
route.
originally, yeah,
Yeah.
didn't do anything for me.
And I want to also say, just, I mean, I should have said this earlier, that obviously if there were any, for you watching, listening, anything that we talk about in this, if anything strikes you or you're concerned about anything, we're not professionals. So you need to
Yes.
do seek out medical professional to help with all of this. This is, purely my experience and Dan's experience here. And yeah, so I'm just to be honest about this, like, I haven't gone down the medication route yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of on the fence. I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm for whatever reason, I've had this kind of, I don't know, but
Resistance.
this funny thing about medication, and I'm telling myself at the moment, this is what's going through my mind. Ian, you need to stop having this negative feeling about it, and actually, it could really help. I know a lot of people it's really helped with. So, I'm interested for you. What has been your relationship with the idea of
Yeah.
medication? And then the second part of that is, you mentioned that you have ADHD and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
How has medication, what was the approach? Because I've heard some doctors
Yeah.
will go down the, let's treat the anxiety first
Yep.
and then the anxiety and then the ADHD, or the
Mm-hmm.
other way around, or let's tackle them both. So I'm just interested in your experience there.
Yeah. Um, and I'm very glad that you said that we are not medical doctors. Do not take what we say. Like I'm going to mention probably a few different things, and I urge anyone watching this or listening to this to not necessarily write these things down, but go speak with a psychiatrist and your general practitioner, your family doctor, whoever it is, a professional before you even think of any of this stuff, right? I mean, I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was just that whole online quiz and then getting some nurse practitioner to write me a prescription. Um, I should have known better. Not that it didn't do me any damage. It just wasn't really my thing. Um, so the medication route, I was so fed up with this procrastination stuff, and I had um, a uh, I had experience with anxiety and anti-anxiety medication in the past. Um, when I came back from Australia, I was not medicated. I didn't seek medication, but later on, when I had that time at I'll just say it at Edelman, where I was working at Edelman, it was a wonderful place, great people, not the right fit for me. But it was not the right fit for me partly because of the depression, anxiety, and ADHD, and also because the stressors were triggering all that like crazy. And I keep thinking, well, had I been medicated, would it have been different? Maybe. Um, but as a result of that, that's when I really went to, started to think about maybe there's more to this, and maybe there's a chemical imbalance or something. And, my doctor said, just try this, see how you go, type of thing. And uh, I started off on something called Wellbutrin, which is a common anti-anxiety slash. It's almost like an um, all around medication that does treat ADHD in a lot of people. And this was years ago, and I did feel better on the Wellbutrin. I mean, it's I think the generic name is bupropion or something, but um, I felt a lot better on it. It got me through some I think it was an anxiety. It was more for anxiety, and I was in a period of time where I had plenty of reason to be anxious. I didn't, I had left a job. I was starting something new. I was in between things. Um, you know, I I I did not know where my next, I wouldn't say paycheck, but how much money was going to come in the following month. I was trying a couple different things. I wasn't afraid that I never thought that I was going to starve, but I I had a lot of pressure over things, and the Wellbutrin definitely helped. The doctor said after a while, and I got a new job and things were going great. He's like, you don't need to take it anymore. So I didn't take it anymore. And again, like I said earlier, when things are going great, when the environment is wonderful, you know, you don't notice necessarily that you need some help. But then with the pandemic and everything we're talking us a few years later, um, that's when I started to think, all right, you know, maybe there's something here. And I had that Adderall experience, and like I said, it didn't really do anything for it. Just made me jittery. It didn't do anything for me. But then I spoke to my real doctor, and we dug into everything's going into my life, like everything's going on, right? Issues with it wasn't so much work issues. It was more like, um, you know, how I'm dealing. I have a daughter who has severe anxiety issues. How am I dealing with her? What's going on, and what's going on with this part of your life, and et cetera, et cetera. And the doctor, wonderful man, he just sort of dug in. And he said, you know what, Dan, you can only be as happy as your least happy child. And that is what made me go to a psychiatrist, because I wasn't doing my daughter any service. I was doing her great disservice, in fact, by letting my own baggage affect the way that I dealt with her, and certainly my wife and everybody like this. And so I went to get therapy. Um, and again, like I said, a proper psychiatrist. And the proper psychiatrist said, okay, after all the intake, we're going to try this. And he took me through a program, and it lasted a while, just like going, okay, we're going to start with this one. Let's see how this goes for 30 days. Let's see how this one goes for 30 days. And with ADHD and anxiety, he did say that he was trying to find things that would lean on sort of treating the anxiety, but really kind of deal with anxiety and distractibility were the two things that he was sort of trying to focus on with me. And and then he worked out a program, and yeah, it took a little adjustment. And then on top of that, so now when you need to really focus, if you feel like you're procrastinating too much, or you really need to really focus, then we go down the road of like, okay, you can take an Adderall or something like that, but not Adderall, basically a stimulant of some kind. But if Adderall didn't do anything for you, then there are a lot of other options out there that are not necessarily straight up amphetamines, like just different things. And we ended up with I guess a regimen or routine that I'm still on now. So I take a I take a I take something for anxiety, very small. Like none of these are massive doses, but like a daily kind of it's called Intuitive or guanfacine, and I do that every day, and that manages the anxiety. And then there's something called Stratera, which is supposed to be a enabling focus for an extended period of time. So those two things are a daily. In the morning, I take those. Um, and then if there is a specifically high pressure project or something due, I do have um, a low dose of something called Vyvanse. I don't know if you heard of Vyvanse. It is a it is an Adderall alternative. It's something like that. But I only take those like on an as needed basis. And everybody needs to be careful with any of those kind of stimulants because they could be addictive. You have to be very, very careful about that kind of stuff. But this one isn't too bad. And I rarely take them. Like only if I know that I need to be focused and locked out. Like if I can't, and it's been helpful. Now, this concoction or this formula that I'm on has absolutely helped me. But in a very small way, not a note. It's not like all of a sudden, oh gosh, I can focus now. It's more like a tendency. Like it takes the tendency to jump around and kind of tamps it down a little bit. I definitely feel a lot of the anxiety has, I can deal with that a lot better. And that's been working for me. Um, and, take what you will from that. I mean, maybe some people out there be like, oh, you're on too many medicines or something like this. I don't know. Um, as far as somebody with ADHD, it's still relatively early days. I've only been on this regimen for a year. And I think it's been very beneficial. Certainly have much better relationships with my daughter. And I find myself the biggest benefit, and whether it's because of the medicine or something else, but the biggest benefits so far have been that I just don't get angry quickly. Um, I'm able to just pause and think about things. I'm a better listener. And maybe that's maturity, maybe it's medicine, maybe it's both. I don't know. But as long as the meds don't do me any harm, I'm okay with it. And as far as Ian, you said that you have you have a resistance, or you don't want to go down that road. I mean, it's completely an individual choice. I just was open to it from a but as long as it came from a well recommended psychiatrist, like
Yeah.
somebody whose business it is to do and whose life it is to do this and understand these things. So I've always been a sucker for doctors. I suppose I respect them. I like what they have to say, and it's been doing good things for me so far. So
Well,
yeah,
that's fantastic. It's really great to hear that. And like, I think we're, as said many times on this podcast before, there are as many different people, there is
mm,
many types of ADHD as there are people with ADHD, and we all have to kind of approach it in the way we want to approach it, and we're all on a journey. I think I wanted to approach it more from I suppose I would call it a holistic point of view.
yeah,
So what are the things that I can do to help and to understand? But I think I'm now at the point when I do want to at least look at the possibility of medication. But if you're listening and watching, you've got to make your own decision. There's no right or wrong. We're not going to tell you that it's this way or that way.
yeah.
Um,
I definitely don't want to
yeah,
don't want to persuade somebody to go and get medication. It's just right for me, right? I mean,
yeah,
if
yeah,
you could do cognitive behavioral therapy, or you can figure out your own tricks and tools that get you by, and you're fine with it, then all power to you. You know, it just works
yeah.
for
And
me.
you mentioned like you get angry less often, and so
Yeah.
that's one thing we haven't talked about. And that, what a trait that's quite common with ADHD is emotional dysregulation.
Hmm.
And sometimes, like one of the reasons why I started to really look at this is because I would get really angry. Well, not angry, but like frustrated with my kids
Yeah.
sometimes, and I just
Yeah.
had so
Totally.
much guilt because I love my kids, and I want the best for them. But I just felt so, and so that's why I thought I need to do something about this, and then realized that actually my son initially he was highly likely to have ADHD, and then we've since realized that we all have ADHD. So on the whole
Yeah.
emotional side of things, what's been your experience with that?
Well, first of all, what you just said could have been, you could said Dan instead of Ian. Same thing. Like frustration with my kids, um, especially my younger, especially one of them, who my younger daughter, who's now 18. She's wonderful, and she's had her struggles. She is just a delightful person, who has, like any teenager, had a lot of emotional issues. But also ADHD, other things that are absolutely can be genetic. Um, and I felt incredibly guilty, for 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 causing that. Like, I felt that I was the cause of all of her issues. Um, and a lot of that was fueled by my own ADHD, but it was also fueled by emotional, like, dysregulation. And this is where my doctors helped a lot, right? Like, Dan, you realize that it's 10% you, 90% everybody else. So just give yourself permission to not feel guilty, but go see a therapist. So that was the answer. Um, but yes, I had over, like, even now, like, occasionally my wife would say, "You're raising your voice. Don't yell at me." I'm like, "I'm not yelling," but I was yelling in some way, or I would snap. on something, you know. Um, and it happened more and more in stressful times. I mean, I guess we all do sometimes, but for me, like I just noticed it more. Um, and my emotional, I guess the difficult emotions for me to regulate were always anger and um, and frustration. Uh, it's and looking back, I can just see many instances where certainly frustration would be felt at the workplace. I would never get angry at work. But when I say ADHD really never affected my job, it never affected my productivity. I don't think, but it certainly, I'm sure it has affected my relationships because of that emotional
Mm.
regulation problems. Right, getting too quickly frustrated with something, feeling like okay, I'm with my boss. This is a safe space. I can vent when maybe it wasn't 100% safe to vent. You know, and you frame it up and you give the context, but even then, it might not have been appropriate in that environment, or maybe I was giving away too much because I would just let the emotions go.
Yeah.
Um, there's something to be said for compartmentalization and understanding when to be emotional, but it's much better to regulate those emotions to begin with.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think I have to continue to work on, but at least I'm aware of it and mindful of it. Um, and simple things like the most important word that my psychiatrist told me is pause. Pause.
Yeah.
Just when you're feeling something, just I don't know, figure out some way to just take a breath and pause, and that changes things a lot.
Yeah. That's really good advice. So as we start to come to a close with this podcast, I mean, I think we could probably talk for another hour on this,
For
but
sure, yeah.
You've mentioned quite a few strategies and tools throughout this podcast, and that idea of pausing, that is one of those things. One of the things that I was working with my ADHD coach and a business coach last year was we were coming up with for me it was called an emotional toolkit. So like if I'm feeling a certain way, like what is it if I'm feeling like really down on myself and everything's going really badly, that's how I'm viewing things. Well, what do I do in that situation? And I look at the toolkit and it kind of helps me. But there are other things that we've talked about, like AI tools.
Mm,
You've also mentioned people around you.
yeah.
You've mentioned your doctor. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the things that you've used in your life since being diagnosed
Mm.
that have really helped you with anxiety, with ADHD. So yeah, just share some of those things with us.
Well, I've already mentioned, like I said, just getting into some of the usual time management tools that people have available to them, and those have been very good. With AI, I love prompting. I mean, I just took to it like a fish to water, or whatever the proper metaphor is, and um, it's just a lot of fun and working out. Like ways to automate some of the things I don't like to do has been a boon. Like writing reports, for example, or curating content for something, um, or summarizing very 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 long documents. I don't. Who likes to read an annual report? I don't. I mean, I'm not an analyst. I don't get a thrill out of it. Um, but that's work, right? That's all work stuff. Um, other other tools I think that are important. I just learned very recently something called forensic listening, which has been around. It's not a new thing, but I had a couple folks on my podcast who run a PR consultancy called the Convincing Company, and the one of the partners' name is Chip Massey. He's a former FBI agent and hostage negotiator and all this kind of good stuff. And he is an expert interrogator, and he talked about forensic listening. And that's like we talked about active listening earlier and about taking notes, but now take that to another level where you're listening and you're taking like serious notes but in a methodical way. Like there's a quadrant and you put your notes in different ways, right? It's a tool. And then after you have that discussion or that meeting, then you go and you read your notes and you reflect on it, um, in but not in a woo woo sort of way. You look at it based on the quadrant of qualities, like to figure out what the real underlying motivators are to the person you were talking to, what's not being said, etc. You don't have to go that deep with your personal relationships all the time, but having a tool like that really forces you to listen real carefully to things and then go back and see what you've missed. So that's been very helpful. And again, it's called forensic listening. I don't think it's trademarked by anybody, but if it is, it might be by Chip Massey. Um, let's see another thing that I do, and this is at the behest of my, or at the suggestion of my psychiatrist, is get a hobby, right? So, um, it's interesting. A lot of people with ADHD, or certainly a lot of creative types, people in our field who may have ADHD, because I think there's a lot of us out there who are undiagnosed. Um, a lot of things that people say is like, yeah, no, you know what? I have a lot of people that I like, but I don't have any really close friends, or all I do is work all the time, right? My psychiatrist has recommended to get a hobby, and the hobby leads to friends, right? I do have some friends, which is a good thing, but I've picked up a hobby or two, and the hobbies help a lot with, I guess, um, releasing some of the pent up distractibility. So get crafty, get into something. I mean, I've gotten into. Sadly, it's a little bit of it could be an expensive hobby at times, but I've really gotten a fascination with collecting pocket knives. It's the strangest thing. I never thought I would, but but I really love the 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 sort of technology behind them, the artisanship, the craftsmanship, all these things that I can get into. Um, you know, as well. I was going to say safely, but they are blades, so it's not exactly. But the point is like it's an outlet, and as long as I have some, it's fun, and there's a whole community involved with this, and I'm making new connections and learning new things. Get crafty. Another suggestion was, um, turn your creativity to something that's like a no pressure craft of some kind. So I don't know what it is. Weaving, I occasionally, and this is the first time I'm ever saying this in public, but I occasionally like to play with paracord and make like lanyards and things like this, like people might have done and when they were kids. Um, it's just like something to do with your hands, and at the end of the day, you have something. So those things are tools that help you cope and kind of balance out, I think, some of the issues that you might have with ADHD. But it doesn't work for everybody. It's just
Yeah, that,
my approach. Yeah.
that's your experience. Well, we are almost out of time. What would be your message for people who've been listening in and or watching, who maybe they've discovered they have ADHD later on in their life,
Mm-hmm.
similar to you and me,
Yeah.
and they're kind of struggling to see it, particularly as when it comes to the whole identity thing. So, like, what would you suggest? What would be your kind of encouragement?
Well, I mean, it is not a one size fits all, as you said, and you need to find out. First of all, you need to figure out whether or not you are on that, in the ADHD kind of world. Are get diagnosed properly. Don't. I would say take the guesswork out of it and just get diagnosed properly. Maybe there's nothing at all. Maybe you just have slight anxiety. Maybe it's just there's environmental issues that are at hand. But go talk to somebody. This is the number one thing: is get professional um, professional diagnosis, and but don't let it identify you. Is the other thing.
Mm.
You've come this far. I can't speak for children, but for adults who've been living with this, understanding it may help you really figure out why you've done a few things in your life, or how you might approach things. But I wouldn't let it be you. You're not ADHD. Rather, what is it about the ADHD that allows you that kind of makes you behave in certain ways, or that gives you the tendency to behave in certain ways. And what about it gives you superpowers? And that's the last thing I think that I want to leave people with is that, um, you know, it can for some. I'm blessed, I guess, in some ways, in that it's really not debilitating to me. But and I know it is for some people, but there are some extremely good benefits to having an ADHD mind, right? And many of the creative people that we know have have ADHD or have an ADHD mind. That hope, that hyper focus, that creativity, that ability to connect dots, the things that you see, things that people don't see. You have and this kind of, most people with ADHD do have this kind of broad view of everything around them and will notice things that nobody else does. And this is another reason why you have to be talking and interrupting people all the time, because you'll see things that people don't see.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, as long as you can figure out how to channel it. And, don't let it get you down. I think that's where I'm at. But get diagnosed and figure out a coping mechanism to get under control, and then figure out how to leverage it.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Dan. Well, it's been such a privilege having you on the show, hearing your story. I feel there's so many other things I want to ask you, but I think we do need to finish there.
Sure,
You just have to come back on the show.
Anytime.
It's been great.
Anytime.
So, how can people connect with you, find out more about you? If anyone's got any questions, you mentioned Instagram is one place, but I'm sure you're other places too.
Instagram, I'm more of a viewer, and I'm not very active poster, but LinkedIn, of course, is the number one place. Just look for me, Daniel Nestle. I think there might be one other Daniel Nestle, but I'm the only one that is you'll know it's me. It's Trending Communicator. Trending Communicator is my podcast. So the Trending Communicator, and it's available on any podcast platform, but also trendingcommunicator.com is this website, and all the socials is pretty much DS Nestle, DSNESTLE on all the socials.
Awesome. Well, all of those links will be in the show notes. So if you just go to smartadhd.me, you can find all of that out and do connect. And if there's anything that has, I don't know, impacted you in this conversation, then do reach out to me or Dan. And we'd obviously love to talk to you. So, well, thank you, Dan. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. This has been great. It's been great to talk about this.